It's March, which means we're approaching the halfway point to the first 100 days in office for our elected leaders. How are they faring? We'll sit down with some experts to discuss and hand out our progress reports. Also tonight, I'll get risk getting tea-licked in the ear, but it's hearing from you, so it's all worth it in order to discuss what matters to you. And finally, what we are going to do tonight, flip-flops. No, not that Pau'asu term for Zori. I'm talking about politicians saying one thing and then doing another down the road. Get ready to grade our politicians. It's the bottom line.
The Bottom Line is filmed in front of a live studio audience of 10 Sorensen employees and brought to you by the Kyle Mandafat Has Too Much Time on His Hands Trust. With the best round table on island, here is your host, Phill Leon Guerrero.
Thanks, Tori. Once again, we are in the month of March, and that means we're approaching the halfway point to 100 days in office. We have a bunch of new people that are serving, and to help us digest it all and maybe give progress reports of their own, we have former Senator and former Calvo Cabinet official, Joanne Brown. Thank you for joining us.
Phil, how are you? It's good to join you again as well.
And we also have a guest host of Newstalk K57 and correspondent for the Andrea Pellicani Show, Mr. Pauly Suba.
Thanks again for having me.
Now, I know that we've sort of been selfish keeping you all to ourselves on K57, Joanne. So for the benefit of our television audience, I think that you really do have an interesting perspective coming immediately from an agency in the government of Guam during the previous administration, the Port Authority, and you sort of gave a baton to your replacement, your successor, former Senator Rory Respicio. You've been very vocal and frank about, I guess, expressing your displeasure at how the management decisions that he's been making so far.
Well, it was unexpected. I mean, you would hope in the transition of new leadership coming in that there would be the focus on what can we do to build the port up from where we are and even make it better, because we've certainly come a long way in the last 8 years, rebuilding the port and getting it to the level of where it needs to be effectively and efficiently operating, getting it the resources, getting our employees the tools and the equipment that they need to do the job well. And then from the very first order on the agenda, we were going to go and essentially pay off what was referred to as the Port 7 employees, and that's the priority of an incident that happened 6 years ago that should go through the proper process. I mean, all of a sudden, if that's the first thing on your agenda, and that's something you're trying to move through, and then redo it, create a task force, have your deputy go and review the matter, it just isn't right. It doesn't send a very good message to a lot of hardworking employees out there that work every day. If people have done something wrong or it's been identified by management and that case has been built and it's going through the Civil Service Commission, it's going through the legal process, then that's where it should be. Anything short of that coming in without the history of what happened, it just clearly makes you think, hey, this is a political payoff. And I don't know any other way to put it. I mean, we've always been frank and direct about things. But when you're trying to take the hardworking people there that have invested to get the port to where it's at, and the first thing you want to do is pay these people off, it just sends the wrong message. And I don't think that's acceptable to us as a community.
Pauly, Joanne, Phill Leon Guerrero, I think former board member of the port, Oscar Calvo, have called for Rory Respicio's resignation because of the politicizing of the port. I guess, sort of from the outside looking in, are you seeing that there are people that are taking sort of these allegations coming from people that have been there, like Joanne, and thinking, there must be something to it? Otherwise, why would there be such a public call like a resignation? I mean, I'm sure Joanne isn't taking that lightly.
Right. Well, I'm coming from a different angle. I like to think that I'm coming from just an outsider looking in. I read the news every day. I watch PNC all the time, and that's where I'm getting my information. Obviously, I work here, so maybe I have like a little bit of an insider look at it. But when I'm looking at some of the situations the topics that are coming from the government, I always look at it, how does it affect me? And I've always thought that the port was moving forward with the Calvo administration. I didn't realize that there were so many different problems internally until this administration took over, or Rory kind of took over. And so that's why I'm like, wow, I didn't know that it's like night and day per se. I thought we were, as far as the port is concerned, that things were looking good with the Calvo administration, with yourself as well. As far as the Calvo administration is concerned, the port is something that I've always seen as successful. And now this new administration is coming in, and there is a lot of bickering. I see a lot of other people coming in and saying the Rory isn't doing that great of a job, and there seems to be more opponents than people that are patting him on the back.
I wonder if, Joanne, this sort of speaks to a larger issue. I sometimes feel a little bad because I feel like I can be thought of as picking on the communications office, but that's where I was in when I was in the Calvo administration.
Right.
And when I see the news stories that happen with Rory Respicio, when I see the hiccups that happened with Ray Tapasnia and Guma Tranquilidad, when I'm looking at the yearning to try to find out if the recommendations of the transition report are going to be followed through with the governor, what I'm identifying clearly, just because of my experience, is there must be better ways to communicate what this administration is going to do, what we should expect the tone and tenor of this administration to be in the first 100 days.
Well, and I think that's a tough job. I mean, it's challenging enough to run for an election, as you know, and then get elected. But then once you get in, all of a sudden the dynamics of reality comes into play. You have the day-to-day obligations and the burden of running the government of Guam with all the challenges and limitations that come with it. And certainly we've seen those hiccups. I mean, the issue of Guma Tranquilidad and the seniors, that wasn't handled very well. And people are always going to remember that interview. Of course, the governor went down to Guma Tranquilidad and reassured the senior residents there that, we're not going to do anything to change. If anything, we're going to try to even make your life here better, which I think is wonderful. But that's where the challenge is. And I think the toughest job of any administration is getting the best capable, competent people that you can, be it working in the communications department, be a director. I mean, you want them to be proficient in knowing what they need to know. If they don't know, you want them to be able to absorb information and process it very quickly. You want them to know what the administration's agenda is very, very carefully and be aware of that so they don't make those type of public mistakes. And then the governor has to come in and she's got a busy enough job, and then she's got to come in and try to undo the damage that one of her own people put in place. So that's their challenge. And while everyone goes, well, you got the initial learning curve, you got to learn very quickly. Otherwise, these type of mistakes are going to continue to happen, and then it distracts from whatever messaging they try to put in place after the fact to make people see things differently.
Well, I don't like that excuse though, like, oh, we're only 5 weeks in or whatever, because you have the governor that has been a former senator. Josh Tenorio has been with the government for a while. Lieutenant Governor has been in the government for a while. You have the people that are directors and whatnot. They've been in positions, to within the government, and I'm still very optimistic about it all. But I feel like the campaign prior to them winning was, we're going to hit the ground running. That we're going to take over, and DOA is going to be better, DOE is going to be better, public safety, public health, and we're questioning almost all of these departments.
Yeah, to be fair, I think even the first term of the Calvo administration experienced a similar problem, and that is you were elected being sold as an agent of change. And now, during the first opening chapters of your administration, what are you going to do to prove that that wasn't just cheap talk? But there's more than just the elected and appointed leaders at Adelup that have to make sure that their campaign translates into governing. Our senators are also having not such an easy of a time. I mean, I know, Joanne, you've been in legislatures where just because there's a Democratic supermajority doesn't mean that everyone is going to get rubber stamped just because you're on the right side of that aisle. But we're seeing sort of infighting just in the first session that happened in this legislature between the speaker and the vice speaker and the former vice speaker. I mean, that might not instill the greatest amount of confidence in people out there.
Well, and that's something they're going to have to work on, because there was that impression we have a Democratic governor, we got a Democratic congressman, we got a Democratic, majority in the legislature, and we're all going to work harmoniously, and the world is wonderful. And the reality so far, at least in a very short time, is that's not the case, and that's where the internal relationships and working with your colleagues. We didn't always agree as a Republican majority when we were there, but we had those issues. We discussed them, we argued them. And then we had respect for each other on the floor. I mean, we could go after the opposition, but let's say I wasn't going to support your bill. I mean, you know that before we walk on the floor. Phill, I'm not going to support your bill. And for whatever reasons, this is the constituency
and
I
it stays
represent.
behind the caucus door.
Well, and I'm not going to get up there and bash you to death.
Right.
But, when the vote comes down, hey, I can't vote for that bill. And that allows that relationship where you maintain a certain degree of decorum, because the public overall, I mean, I think we can gauge. The public overall, even ourselves, you just get tired of government as usual. You want to see progressive change. Now, we know everything's not going to happen overnight. We know money's not going to fall from the sky and correct every issue that we have. But you want to know that people are really making that extra effort. They're doing the best they can. Sometimes being truthful about it is like the best thing to do. Trying to project that everything's wonderful, and all of a sudden we see all the cracks, and then we're frustrated. Tell us where we're at. What can we do? What steps can be made? Maybe everything doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't. In reality, it doesn't happen overnight. But what are we doing to get there? And then where you, like in this current case with the healthcare issue of allowing this to be included for the insurance program for the governor of Guam, that's a pretty big issue. Why is it the first thing on the major agenda of the legislature for this term? Is that the most critical issue? What's the cost going to be at the end of the day? I think every consumer, it's not just the governor of Guam employee that may have to pay more. At the end of the day, it's the taxpayers that contribute to that process. What is it going to cost them? And how critical is this to the overall issues facing the government of Guam? What's the bottom line? And I think sometimes we don't take enough to do that because we want to be very instant. We want to, show everyone we're doing well and we're out there looking for their interests. But sometimes in that rushing to try to, or somebody else's agenda is trying to move things along a lot quicker, we don't make the best decisions, and then our people suffer, and then they're frustrated. And after a while, you just, a lot of people out there get disillusioned.
We got to wrap it up, but I think just in the interest of fairness, we should at least touch on how you guys are feeling about the progress so far of our freshman delegate to Congress. I think a lot of people, especially on K57, have aired grievances of, wow, I did not expect you to maybe, the appearances, you seem a little unprepared for this job.
Well, and I have to give credit, because those like, the former delegate, Madeline Bordalio, who was a class act, I mean, Robert Underwood, now you look back and you're looking, man, they look pretty good in comparison. And it's not anything against Michael San Nicolas. He's young, he's new. I think he's getting a reality check, and I hope he takes the lesson well early on and learns from this situation, because if he doesn't, I don't know that he's going to be around too many more terms. I don't care, sit under a coconut tree with your cell phone. If that's what it takes to show that you're demonstrating that even if he's busy in Washington getting settled in, he has his key staffers or representatives out there to, Messiah, write it on a piece of paper. Do something to show that you're out there and you're out there with the people. Social media, I guess, for those that are engaged, is a wonderful thing. Information moves very quickly. We have the ability to communicate very quickly. But for the average person out there, especially our elderly, those that may need that type of assistance, this most recent sad situation of one of our soldiers that died, then we're hearing report in the media, they can't report why he died. If that was my family member, I'd be beside myself. That's something I'd be calling my congressman up right away, and I would want that sense of connection and that you're there to help me and help my family get some answers. So I think he's got some work to do. But I'll tell you, if I ever get a verbal lashing from Robert Underwood like that, I'm really going to have to rethink what I'm doing, because those are the seasoned, experienced individuals that did their jobs very well and carried themselves very well with the time they're in office. And if I were him, I'd be looking for guidance and direction rather than coming out and attacking. I'd say I'd take it in rather than trying to retaliate and look for some alternate reason or excuse as to why something's not happening.
Well, how do you think he can turn this perception around, Paul?
I have to say what former Senator Brown is saying is correct. You have to open up the lines of communication to our elderly, to our veterans.
Yeah.
Those are the people that really need your help out there. We need to figure out how we're going to get the money that's promised to us already from years past, and just being more open and realizing that your way might not be the best way, that you have Madeline Bordalio, you have Robert Underwood. They should be your allies. They should be your mentors, not your enemies.
Well, with apologies to our producers, we're running a little long-winded here, but I'm used to 4 hours on the air, so we're just still adjusting. We're going to come back with more of the hottest conversations around the island. You're watching, I was going to say you're listening, you're watching The Bottom Line here on the stations of the Sorensen Media Group. Politicians make a lot of promises during the campaign season. Some would argue that they'll say almost anything to get elected. But how do their statements before November translate to the governing that's done after January? We took a look with some of the examples of our elected leaders in office today to find out more. What a difference a year makes. The 35th legislature and Governor Phill Leon Guerrero are in the middle of the first major fiscal policy shifts during this new term in office, and it's causing consistency issues for at least some who were successful in the 2018 campaign. For Republicans, the danger is contradicting past support for tax increases under Governor Eddie Calvo with opposition to similar proposals eyed by the present administration. Take Senator Luis Muñoz, for instance. 11 months ago, during the height of debate on a measure to bump up Guam's invisible sales tax, the then freshman lawmaker pushed back against criticism that a hike to the BPT would hit poor families the hardest.
I kept trying to wrap my head around what the devastation. I mean, everybody kept saying, oh, it's going to be devastating. 2% is going to be devastating. And when I looked at this case study impact and I saw like food costs and other expenses, that total a little over $1,200. And I'm just going to assume that maybe this is a month, right? I don't know anybody who spends $1,200 on food and expenses a month. But a 2% on top of that is only $25. And realistically, if you cut that in half at $600 a month, if somebody spends that much money on food or other expenses, that's 2% increase is only $12. And even if you don't spend $600, if you only spend $300, that's only $6 more. So I keep trying to wrap my head around why people keep saying this is so devastating. I don't understand it.
While a $25 added monthly expense due to a tax increase was something Muñoz argued could be easily borne on the shoulders of every consumer last year, she's changed her tune now that a Democrat is seeking higher taxes to bail out a GovGuam revenue shortfall. Here's her argument against raising real estate bills for about 500 landowners with buildings worth $1 million or more.
Rather than just saying, let's just tax everybody $1 million and more, which that tax is going to be passed on to our individual families. Say, for example, and I don't want to just use this example as a deciding factor for some people, but some of the people that live, for example, in Hemlani apartments, if this bill is passed, maybe their rent is going to go up another $25. Definitely, they can't afford that. They can barely even afford the monthly rent to begin with. So if we pass Bill 435 without this amendment, that amount is going to be passed on to people such as the people that rent at Hemlani Apartments, or any apartment for that matter, because the apartment owner is going to pass that cost on to our individual families. Now, we can't compare this to the people who are making money off of retail spaces because they're making money too as well. The families are not making money, they're just trying to live day to day, paycheck to paycheck. And that's really who I'm trying to protect here. Not the people who are making that have $1 million or more in property, but the people that they're passing that cost on to.
The contradiction begs the question. If families living paycheck to paycheck could stomach a tax increase Governor Calvo wanted, why can't fewer families tackle the same estimated additional burden sought out by Governor Leon Guerrero? But Muñoz isn't the only returning Republican who finds themselves having to explain apparent contradictions. Senator Will Castro, in the previous term, supported increasing the BPT, raising taxes paid at the gas pump, and establishing a new visible sales tax. In the 35th legislature, however, he's led the charge against the latest proposed increase and argues the differences in circumstances between then and now including projected back-to-back surpluses, justify the change in position.
We did that well after October 1, 2018 financially as a government. I'm not even going into the cost-cutting, cost containment part of this discussion. Why do we need an additional $9 million? Oh no, it's not a cash shortfall. I think we need to refer to the letter that was provided to us by the good chairman. The question then becomes unrealized revenue. It's only a shortfall if you spend more than you expected to receive. I think we need to hold the line. My real question to my colleagues who returned to the 35th Guam legislature is where are we going? Are we going to simply walk away and abandon the position we took as a body in the 34th to look at some fiscal restraint measures, such as reorganization of government as proffered by the former Senator Frank Blas Uggan Jr.? What about the SAR, the supplemental appropriations, as proffered and passed by the former Senator Mike Nicholas himself? What about the $200 million tax liability that's also cited in the Transition Committee report? What about, and I didn't vote for this, but what about that measure that said we're not going to fund deputy directors going forward in January? What about that? And the court struck it down. But let me be clear. The court said it was inorganic, that we can't tell the executive, the chief executive, not to do that. But there's nothing to stop the chief executive from making the right decisions, to live in conformance with the spirit of the law, to control costs.
As Senator Castro alluded to, even the governor herself has some explaining to do. During her bid for office last year, then candidate Phill Leon Guerrero argued GovGuam was obligated to collect more than $200 million in owed taxes before any rates are raised. And regardless of the so-called or more bill fixing a mistake rather than proposing a never-before-seen increase, the practical effect is higher taxation for some landowners. The island's first Magahaga supports the bill, but has yet to explain how signing it into law wouldn't constitute a breaking of a campaign promise, a commitment to end politically unpopular tax increases that benefited her eventual successful run for governor. Guam right now has a new attorney general, delegate to the House of Representatives, public auditor, and a slew of new lawmakers. Each has a record of conduct and promises made in and out of office. Bottom line, they should all be held accountable to what they say and do, and should expect the public and the media to remember when their actions seem to be based on political considerations rather than conviction. And here to deliver our special monthly address, we have some friends from Game.
Hi, I'm Mandy. I'm from Guam Animals in Need. And this is my friend Chester. He's one of our adoptables up at the shelter. He's 7 months. He's a brindle boonie mix. And he's actually looking for a foster right now.
So how can you foster Chester and your other pets?
So if you're interested in fostering, you can go ahead and email our foster care coordinator, Sasha Coleman, at sasha@guamanimals.org. You can call us up at the shelter at 653-4246. And you can also check out our website, guamanimals.org. We have all of our adoptable and fosterable animals online.
Well, thank you very much for coming in. Thank you, Chester. And we'll see you next time on The Bottom Line.